Okay, a quick video to discuss medical school applications, what a good application is supposed to look like. I know this is the time of year where many people are deciding whether to apply to medical school or not, what to put in their personal statements, what medical school to apply to, and many people are considering and questioning whether a career in medicine is correct for them, and also whether a career in medicine is something that is actually feasible and whether they can get a spot in medical school. So hopefully this video will serve as a bit of guidance and a bit of advice, and hopefully a confidence booster for those of you thinking of applying. There are quite a lot of aspects to an application to medical school. There's quite a lot of hoops to jump through, quite a lot of hurdles to cross, and hopefully I'll try to provide a little bit of guidance on each of the important aspects of applying to medical school. I think it's very, very important to note early on that if you do want to become a doctor, that is something you've set your life, or rather set your goal in life to be, or whether even if you're considering it, it is important not to kind of give up on that dream very quickly, because it is a tough process to get in. But I do believe that anybody can get into medical school. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be particularly intelligent or gifted in anything. You just need to have a desire to become a doctor. And then if that is truly what you want to do, I have no doubt that you will get in, but it may not be at the first attempt. And I think that's the most realistic thing that people find difficult to take in, is that they may not get in the first try, they may not even get in the second try or the third try. But if they want it bad enough, they will get it in the end. And for example, I know numerous people that have not managed to get a spot in their first, second, third, fourth attempt, but they've managed it in the fifth or sixth attempt. And that in itself is just proof of how dedicated they are to wanting to go into the profession. So if you realistically want it bad enough, I don't think there's anything that can realistically stop you. Now that that's out of the way, let's go into some of the technicalities of what a application is meant to look like and what some of the key features you need to include. So there's obviously different aspects, and depending on where you are in the world, that's your application is going to differ slightly, and the process is going to differ. But generally speaking, you have the academic background aspects, in that medical schools, generally speaking, are looking for very strong academic applicants. However, this is not an absolute requirement. There are ways around it, and there are many ways you can make a massive academic improvement in a short period of time if you target the right things. So what do I mean by all of this? For example, the greatest, I think, indicator to medical schools of your academic potential is your end of high school grades, or if you're just doing an undergraduate degree, your end of undergraduate degree grades. And certain medical schools will also look at your major kind of academic exam point prior to your high school grades, because you may not have completed those exams at the point at which you're applying. So yes, you do need good academic grades, but if you don't have them, that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. And that's for numerous reasons. One, you can always repeat your examinations, or say if you can't repeat your examinations, you can always do, say, an undergraduate degree. You can do a second undergraduate degree if you've done one already, where you purely focus on getting good grades, and you will tick that box. So either you repeat the ones that you've just recently done, or you create a new set of exams for yourself in that you join a different course, and then you do well in those, and then you get the grades. So I know a lot of people say, oh, my grades aren't good enough, I can't apply. To a certain degree, if they're absolutely horrible, you may not be able to apply first round. However, that is not a reason not to try something different and get the grades and then apply. And that brings us on to something else, which is getting good grades. How do you get good grades? The very, very classically stated thing in culture is that you have to be extremely intelligent to even think of applying. To get good grades, you have to have IQ of 200 and this, that, and the other. So none of that is true at all. You don't need intelligence. Intelligence is not a requirement to do well in exams. Now, why do I say this, and why do I say this so boldly? The formula is pretty simple for doing well in any exams, whether they be pre-medical school, in medical school, post-medical school, or not medical school at all. is that you need to put in effort and hard work. That's it. It's a simple amount of hours that is required. There's a specific threshold of hours that you need to put in to a point where the material that you're studying or you're revising or you're learning is, you understand it, you understand the concepts, and you remember it as well, right? So there's obviously different aspects of studying. One is understanding, conceptual understanding, and the other is memorization, regurgitation. So the simple formula is hard work tends to equal some form of success, right? Now, how do you further kind of investigate that? How do you further break that down to something that's a bit more practical? It's a nice generic catchphrase to say that, but what does that actually mean in terms of practice? So it's a set amount of hours realistically, and there's a threshold, there's a set amount of hours required to achieve competency and to achieve, or rather to have put in this amount of work where you can do any examination on the specific topic and do well, right? So it's a certain threshold. Now, the amount of work that you need to put in, the amount of hours that need to go in, can be modified or can be increased or decreased based on a number of factors. One of these factors is intelligence, right? And one of these factors is how quickly you can grasp things, right? i.e. intelligence, how long it takes you to understand the full concepts. And that's just a small part of it though. So some of the other parts that are, I would argue, possibly more important is good study technique. If you know how to study well, and if you know how to memorize well, whereas a lot of examinations can oftentimes just be a memorization game where you're just expected to regurgitate information. There's no understanding realistically needed, or it's a very small minimal level of understanding that you need. And in those exams, the focus is just regurgitation, learning mass amounts of information, remembering it, and then going into the exam and just spewing it onto the piece of paper and then getting a good grade. Now, I wouldn't say intelligence helps there. If you are a better memorizer, if you have good techniques, you can remember things well because of these techniques, because of the concepts that are taught in memory retention skills, then you will oftentimes, you can easily do better than the individual who's a lot smarter but just doesn't know how to study or doesn't know how to memorize facts very well. So intelligence, like I said, and I think I've said this too many times throughout this video, is not required. And the reason I keep repeating it is because this is a major mental barrier for a lot of people when they consider applying for medicine, because they think they're not smart enough to do medicine. That is not the case. 99.9% of the population should, in my opinion, be able to apply and get into medical school, right? You just need to have a good tactic. You need to have a good strategy. So how do you have a good tactic? How do you have a good strategy? How do you figure out what your personal strategy is? And that's by firstly self-examination, right? What are you good at? What are you bad at? Simple. If you are good academically, then put that to the side, focus on other aspects of the application. If you are horrible academically, then you need to work on that first, and then you can move on to other aspects of the application. So knowing what you're good at and then how to sell that is very, very important. So not all medical schools are the same. Certain medical schools will have quite a lot of emphasis on having a really, really good academic background, and that's all they care about. They don't care about anything else. They can brush over the other things, but they really want you to be very, very academically gifted. And gifted is a colloquial term, and I don't think it's very true. You don't have to be very gifted. You just have to know how to study right. So they look at applicants who are very, very academically strong, and those are the generic demographic of applicants they give their offers to. Examples: Oxford, Cambridge, London universities. They kind of look for very academically strong applicants. Now the thing here is that if you aren't that strong, don't apply to these universities. You can build up your academic CV and do, like I said, do extra exams and such, and get good grades and then apply. But if you don't have them right now and you're applying in this round, for example, then you need to focus on universities that will cater to your strengths. So if you're really good in sports, if you're good in terms of any form of extracurricular activity, charity work, or you represent the country on a national level at anything, or even a local or regional level at anything. A lot of universities prefer that in applicants with a mediocre academic background, but if they're really strong in these aspects, that makes you look good. And the general principle is, for having a really good application, be amazing at one thing and then be average at everything else. That's usually more than enough to get you over the line. If you're amazing at everything, sure, anybody will accept you. But you need to be amazing at one thing, and then everything else needs to be average, some below average, some above average, so that it all kind of pans out to being a relatively rounded individual that's good at one thing. And that is a, generally speaking, good application. So that kind of ties a bit more into your personal statement, and then more of the interview in terms of when they start asking you about personal questions. Oh, tell me what type of person you are, tell me about your extracurricular hobbies and activities, how do you manage stress, all these very, very typical examination, or rather interview questions. That's where you start feeding these things in. That's where you start showing off that, oh, I'm on the national team for swimming, or this, that, and the other, right? So that's where these kind of things come in. Academics is different in that will pop on your application early on. So you don't really need to show off that much in the interview because they'll have all your grades already.